his cloak. Nynaeve hardly seemed to realize where she was going. "Come," Shiriam said. "I will see you settled in your rooms. The White Tower awaits." Chapter 19. Beneath the Dagger. Night on the edge of Kinslayer's Dagger was cold, as nights in the mountains are always cold. The wind whipped down from the high peaks, carrying the iciness of the snowcaps. Rand shifted on the hard ground, tugging at his cloak and blanket, and only half asleep. His hand went to his sword, lying beside him. One more day, he thought drowsily. Just one more, and then we go. If no one comes tomorrow, Ingtar or Dark Friends 1, I'll take Selene to Kyrian. He had told himself that before. Every day they had been there on the mountainside, watching the place where Huron said the trail had been, in that other world, where Selene said the Dark Friends would surely appear in this world. He told himself it was time to leave. And Selene talked of the Horn of Valir and touched his arm and looked into his eyes. And before he knew it, he had agreed to yet another day before they went on. He shrugged against the chill of the wind, thinking of Selene touching his arm and looking into his eyes. If Egwene saw that, she'd shear me for a sheep, and Selene too. Egwene could already be in Tar Valon by now, learning to be an Aes Sedai. The next time she sees me, she'll probably try to gentle me. As he shifted over, his hand slid past the sword and touched the bundle holding Tom Maryland's harp and flute. Unconsciously, his fingers tightened on the Gleeman's cloak. I was happy then, I think, even running for my life, playing the flute for my supper. I was too ignorant to know what was going on. There's no turning back. Shivering, he opened his eyes. The only light came from the waning moon, not far past full and low in the sky. A fire would give them away to those for whom they watched. Loyal muttered in his sleep, a low rumble. One of the horses stamped a hoof. Huron had the first watch from a stone outcrop a little way up the mountain. He would be and stopped. In the moonlight, he could see the shape of Selene bending over his saddlebags, her hands on the buckles. Her white dress gathered the faint light. Do you need something? She gave a jump and stared toward him. You startled me. He rolled to his feet, shedding the blanket and wrapping the cloak around himself, and went to her. He was sure he had left the saddlebags right by his side when he lay down. He always kept them close. He took them from her. All the buckles were fastened, even those in the side that held the damning banner. How can my life depend on keeping it? If anybody sees it and knows what it is, I'll die for having it. He peered at her suspiciously. Selene stayed where she was, looking up at him. The moon glistened in her dark eyes. It came to me, she said, that I've been wearing this dress too long. I could brush it at least, if I had something else to wear while I did.
My name's Jesse, too.
One of your shirts,
Nice
perhaps.
to meet you.
Rand nodded, feeling a sudden relief. Her dress looked as clean to him as when he first saw her, but he knew that if a spot appeared on Egwene's dress, nothing would do but that she cleaned it immediately.
There you go, buddy.
Of course.
There you go.
He opened the capacious pocket into which he had stuffed everything except the banner and pulled out one of the white silk shirts. Thank you. Her hands went behind her back. To the buttons, he realized. Eyes wide, he spun away from her. If you could help me with these, it would be much easier. Rand cleared his throat. It would not be proper.
There you
It isn't as if we were promised or... Stop thinking
go.
that.
Yeah, pretty name.
You can never marry anyone.
I'm trying to give him a peanut.
It just wouldn't be proper.
There you go.
Her soft laugh sent a shiver down his back as if she had run a finger along his
There you go, buddy.
spine. He tried not to listen to the rustlings behind him. He said,
There you
Uh,
go.
tomorrow,
Oh, that went off the roof. I'm
tomorrow
sorry.
we'll leave for Kyrian.
I am not good.
And what of the Horn of Valir? Maybe we were wrong. Maybe they are not coming here at all. Huron says there are a number of passes through Kinslayer's dagger. If they went only a little further west, they do not have to come into the mountains at all. But the trail we followed came
Thank you.
here.
Appreciate
They will
that.
come here. The Horn will come here. You may turn around now. You say that, but we don't know.
Apologize for interrupting, but this is a book called The Wheel of Time. It's my favorite book series. There's about 14 books in this series. It was written by Robert Jordan. That's not really his name. It's an alias he used to write the books. But it was finished by Brandon Sanderson because Robert Jordan died while he was writing the books. And it's just one of my favorite book series of all time. And this is book 2, Wheel of Time. It's called The Great Hunt. We're on chapter 19 right now. I listened to chapter 17 partial and 18 yesterday, so that's what I'm doing. Have a good day. Have a good, great, jolly day.
He turned, and the words died in his mouth.
Blech.
Her dress lay across her arm, and she wore his shirt, hanging in baggy folds on her. It was a long-tailed shirt, made for his height, but she was tall for a woman.
Ain't that funny? They took their like off the video, and, well, screw you too.
The
Have a
bottom of
good
it
day.
came little more than halfway down her thighs. It was not as if he had never seen a girl's legs before. Girls in the Two Rivers always tied up their skirts to go wading in waterwood ponds.
Did they?
But they stopped doing it well before they were old enough to braid their hair. And this was in the dark besides. The moonlight seemed to make her skin glow. What is it you don't know, Rand? The sound of her voice unfroze his joints. With a loud cough, he whirled to face the other way. I think, think of the glory, Rand.
Oh, yeah.
Her hand touched his back, and he almost shamed himself with a squeak.
It's great.
Think of the glory that will come to the one who finds the Horn of Valir. How proud I'll be to stand beside him who holds the horn.
What a whole...
You have no idea the heights we will scale together, you and I. With the Horn of Valir in your hand, you can be a king. You can be another Arthur Hawkwing. Lord Rand! Huron panted into the campsite. My lord, they... He skidded to a halt, suddenly making a gurgling sound. His eyes dropped to the ground, and he stood wringing his hands. Forgive me, milady. I didn't mean to... Forgive me. Loyal sat up, his blanket and cloak falling away.
Damn smog.
What's happening? Is it my turn to watch already? He looked toward Rand and Celine, and even in the moonlight, the widening of his eyes was plain. Rand heard Celine sigh behind him. He stepped away from her, still not looking at her. Her legs are so white, so smooth. What is it, Huron?
Creep.
He made his voice more moderate. Was he angry with Huron, himself, or Celine? No reason to be angry with her. Did you see something, Huron? The sniffer spoke without raising his eyes. A fire, my lord, down in the hills. I didn't see it at first. They made it small and hid it. But they hid it from somebody following them. Not somebody ahead and up above. 2 miles, Lord Rand. Less than 3 for sure. Thane, Rand said. Inked I would not be afraid of anyone following him. It must be Fane. Suddenly, he did not know what to do now. They had been waiting for Fane, but now that the man was only a mile or so away, he was uncertain. In the morning? In the morning we will follow. When Ingtar and the others catch up, we'll be able to point right to them. So, Selene said, you will let this Ingtar take the Horn of Valia? And the glory? I don't want... Without thinking, he turned, and there she was, legs pale in the moonlight, and as unconcerned that they were bare as if she were alone. As if we were alone, the thought came. She wants the man who finds the horn. 3 of us cannot take it away from them. Ingtar has 20 lances with him. You don't know you cannot take it. How many followers does this man have? You don't know that either. Her voice was calm but intent. You don't even know if these men camped down there do have the horn. The only way is to go down yourself and see. Take the Alanton. His kind have sharp eyes, even by moonlight, and he has the strength to carry the horn in his chest if you make the right decision. She's right. You do not know for sure if it's Fane. A fine thing it would be to have Huron casting about for a trail that was not there, all of them out in the open if the real Dark Friends did finally come. I will go alone, he said. Huron and Loyal will stand guard for you. Laughing, Selene came to him so gracefully it almost seemed she danced. Moon shadows veiled her face in mystery as she looked up at him, and mystery made her even more beautiful. I am capable of guarding myself, until you return to protect me. Take the Alanton.
She is right, Rand,
Loyal said, rising.
I can see better by moonlight than you. With my eyes, we may not need to go as close as you would alone.
Very well. Rand strode over to his sword and buckled it at his waist. Bow and quiver he left where they lay. A bow was not of much use in the dark, and he intended to look, not fight. Huron, show me this fire. The sniffer led him scrambling up the slope to the outcrop, like a huge stone thumb thrust out of the mountain. The fire was only a speck. He missed it the first time Huron pointed. Whoever had made it did not mean for it to be seen. He fixed it in his head. By the time they returned to the camp, Loyal had saddled Red and his own horse. As Rand climbed to the bay's back, Selene caught his hand. Remember the glory, she said softly. Remember. The shirt seemed to fit her better than he recalled, molding itself to her form. He drew a deep breath and took his hand back. Guard her with your life, Huron. Loyal? He heeled Red's flanks gently. The Ogier's big mount plodded along behind. They did not try to move quickly. Night shrouded the mountainside, and moon-cast shadows made footing uncertain. Rand could not see the fire any longer. No doubt it was better hidden from eyes on the same level, but he had its location in his mind. For someone who had learned to hunt in the tangle of the Westwood, in the 2 rivers, finding the fire would be no great difficulty. And what then? Selene's face loomed before him. How proud I'll be to stand beside him who holds the horn. Loyal, he said suddenly, trying to clear his thoughts. What's this Alanton she calls you?
It's the old tongue, Rand.
The Ogier's horse picked its way uncertainly, but he guided it almost as surely as if it were daylight.
It means brother, and is short for Tir Arvende Alanton. Brother to the trees. Tree brother. It is very formal, but then I've heard the Cairhienin are formal. The noble houses are, at least. The common people I saw there were not very formal at all.
Rand frowned. A shepherd would not be very acceptable to a formal Cairhienin noble house. Light, Matt's right about you. You're crazy, and with a big head to boot. But if I could marry... He wished he could stop thinking, and before he realized it, the void had formed within him, making thoughts distant things as if part of someone else. Saidin shone at him, beckoned to him. He gritted his teeth and ignored it. It was like ignoring a burning coal inside his head, but at least he could hold it at bay. Barely. He almost left the void, but the Dark Friends were out there in the night, and closer now. And the Trollocs. He needed the emptiness, needed even the uneasy calm of the void. I don't have to touch it. I don't. After a time, he reined in Red. They stood at the base of a hill, the wide scattered trees on its slopes, black in the night. "I think we must be close by now," he said softly. "Best we go the rest of the way on foot." He slid from the saddle and tied the bay's reins to a branch.
"Are you all right?"
Loyal whispered, climbing down.
"You sound odd."
"I'm fine." His voice sounded tight, he realized. Stretched. Saidin called to him. "No. Be careful. I can't be sure exactly how far it is, but that fire should be somewhere just ahead of us. On the hilltop, I think." The Ogier nodded. Rand slowly stole from tree to tree, placing each foot carefully, holding his sword tight so it did not clatter against a tree trunk. He was grateful for the lack of undergrowth. Loyal followed like a big shadow. Rand could not see much more of him than that. Everything was moon shadows and darkness. Suddenly, some trick of the moonlight resolved the shadows ahead of him, and he froze, touching the rough bole of a leather leaf. Dim mounds on the ground became men wrapped in blankets, and apart from them, a group of larger mounds, sleeping Trollocs. They had doused the fire. One moonbeam, moving through the branches, caught a shine of gold and silver on the ground halfway between the two groups. The moonlight seemed to brighten. For an instant, he could see clearly. The shape of a sleeping man lay close by to the gleam, but that was not what held his eye. The chest, the horn, and something atop it, a point of red flashing in the moonbeam. The dagger. Why would Thane put... Loyal's huge hand settled over Rand's mouth, and a good part of his face besides. He twisted to look at the Ogier. Loyal pointed off to his right slowly, as if motion might attract attention. At first, Rand could not see anything. Then a shadow moved not 10 paces away. A tall, bulky shadow, and snouted. Rand's breath caught. A Trolloc. It lifted its snout as if sniffing. Some of them hunted by scent. For an instant, the void wavered. Someone stirred in the Darkfriend camp, and the Trolloc turned to peer that way. Rand froze, letting the calm of emptiness envelop him. His hand was on his sword, but he did not think of it. The void was all. Whatever happened, happened. He watched the Trolloc without blinking. A moment longer, the snouted shadow watched the Darkfriend camp, then, as if satisfied, folded itself down beside a tree. Almost immediately, a low sound like coarse cloth ripping drifted from it. Loyal put his mouth close to Rand's ear.
"It's asleep,"
he whispered incredulously. Rand nodded. Tam had told him Trollocs were lazy, apt to give up any task but killing unless fear kept them to it. He turned back to the camp. All was still and quiet there again. The moonbeam no longer shone on the chest, but he knew now which shadow it was. He could see it in his mind, floating beyond the void, glittering, golden, chased with silver, in the glow of Saidin. The horn of Valir and the dagger Matt needed, both almost within reach of his hand. Celine's face drifted with the chest. They could follow Fane's party in the morning and wait until Ingtar joined them. If Ingtar did come, if he still followed the trail without his sniffer. No. There would never be a better chance. All within reach of his hand. Celine was waiting on the mountain. Motioning for Loyal to follow, Rand dropped to his belly and crawled toward the chest. He heard the Ogier's muffled gasp, but his eyes were fixed on that one shadowed mound ahead. Darkfriends and Trollocs lay to left and right of him, but once he had seen Tam stalk close enough to a deer to put his hand on its flank before the animal bounded off. He had tried to learn from Tam. Madness. The thought flew by dimly, almost out of reach. This is madness. You are going mad. Dim thoughts, someone else's thoughts. Slowly, silently, he slithered to that one special shadow and put out a hand. Ornate traceries worked in gold met his touch. It was the chest that held the horn of Valir. His hand touched something else on the lid. The dagger, bare-bladed. In the dark, his eyes widened. Remembering what it had done to Matt, he jerked back, the void shifting with his agitation. The man sleeping nearby, no more than 2 paces from the chest, no one else lay so close by spans, groaned in his sleep and thrashed at his blankets. Rand allowed the void to sweep thought and fear away. Murmuring uneasily in his sleep, the man stilled. Rand let his hand go back to the dagger, not quite touching it. It had not harmed Matt in the beginning. Not much, at least. Not quickly. In one swift motion, he lifted the dagger, stuck it behind his belt, and pulled his hand away, as if it might help to minimize the time it touched his bare skin. Perhaps it would, and Matt would die without the dagger. He could feel it there, almost a weight pulling him down, pressing against him. But in the void, sensation was as distant as thought, and the feel of the dagger faded quickly to something he was used to. He wasted only a moment more staring at the shadow-wrapped chest. The horn had to be inside. But he did not know how to open it, and he could not lift it by himself. Then he looked around for Loyal. He found the Ogier crouched not far behind him, massive head swiveling as he peered back and forth from sleeping human dark friends to sleeping Trollocs. Even in the night, it was plain Loyal's eyes were as wide as they could go. They looked as big as saucers in the light of the moon. Rand reached out and took Loyal's hand. The Ogier gave a start and gasped. Rand put a finger across his lips, set Loyal's hand on the chest, and mind lifting. For a time, it seemed forever in the night, with dark friends and Trollocs all around. It could not have been more than heartbeats. Loyal stared. Then, slowly, he put his arms around the golden chest and stood. He made it seem effortless. Ever so carefully, even more carefully than he had come in, Rand began to walk out of the camp, behind Loyal on the chest. Both hands on his sword, he watched the sleeping dark friends, the still shapes of the Trollocs. All those shadowed figures began to be swallowed deeper in the darkness as they drew away. Almost free. We've done it. The man who had been sleeping near the chest suddenly sat up with a strangled yell, then leaped to his feet. It's gone! Wake, you filth! It's gone! Fane's voice. Even in the void, Rand recognized it. The others scrambled erect, dark friends and Trollocs, calling to know what was happening, growling and snarling. Fane's voice rose to a howl. I know it is you, Althor. You're hiding from me, but I know you're out there. Find him! Find him! Althor! Men and Trollocs scattered in every direction. Wrapped in emptiness, Rand kept moving. Almost forgotten in entering the camp, Saidin pulsed at him.
He cannot see us, Loyal whispered low. Once we reach the horses.
A Trolloc leaped out of the dark at them, cruel eagle's beak in a man's face where mouth and nose should have been, scythe-like sword already whistling through the air. Rand moved without thought. He was one with the blade. Cat dances on the wall. The Trolloc screamed as it fell, screamed again as it died. Run, Loyal! Rand commanded. Saidin called to him. Run! He was dimly aware of Loyal lumbering to an awkward gallop, but another Trolloc loomed from the night, boar-snouted and tusked, spiked axe raised. Smoothly, Rand glided between Trolloc and Ogier. Loyal musket the horn away. Head and shoulders taller than Rand, half again as wide, the Trolloc came at him with a silent snarl. The courtier taps his fan. No scream this time. He walked backwards after Loyal, watching the night. Saidin sang to him, such a sweet song. The power could burn them all. Burn Thane and all the rest to cinders. No! 2 more Trollocs, wolf and ram, gleaming teeth and curling horns. Lizard in the thorn bush. He rose smoothly from one knee as the second toppled, horns almost brushing his shoulder. The song of Saidin caressed him with seduction, pulled him with 1,000 silken strings. Burn them all with the power. No, no! Better dead than that.
Yes.
If I were dead, it would be done with. A knot of Trollocs came into sight, hunting uncertainly. 3 of them. 4. Suddenly one of them pointed to Rand and raised a howl the rest answered as they charged. Let it be done with, Rand shouted, and leaped to meet them. For an instant surprise slowed them. Then they came on with guttural cries, gleeful, bloodthirsty, swords and maces raised. He danced among them to the song of Saidin. Hummingbird kisses the honey rose. So cunning, that song, filling him. Cat on hot sand. The sword seemed alive in his hands, as it had never been before, and he fought as if a heron-marked blade could keep Saidin from him. The heron spreads its wings. Rand stared at the motionless shapes on the ground around him. Better to be dead, he murmured. He raised his eyes, back up the hill toward where the camp lay. Fane was there, and dark friends, and more Trollocs. Too many to fight, too many to face and live. He took a step that way, another.
Rand, come on!
Loyal's urgent whispered call drifted through the emptiness to him.
For life and the light, Rand, come on!
Carefully, Rand bent to wipe his blade on a Trolloc's coat. Then, as formally as if Lan were watching him train, he sheathed it.
Rand!
As though he knew of no urgency, Rand joined Loyal by the horses. The Ogier was tying the golden chest atop his saddle with straps from his saddlebags. His cloak was stuffed underneath to help balance the chest in the rounded saddle seat. Saidin sang no more. It was there, that stomach-turning glow, but it held back as if he truly had fought it off. Wonderingly, he let the void vanish. I think I'm going mad, he said. Suddenly realizing where they were, he peered back the way they had come. Shouts and howls came from half a dozen different directions, signs of search, but none of pursuit. Yet. He swung up onto Red's back.
Sometimes I do not understand half of what you say,
Loyal said.
If you must go mad, could it at least wait until we are back with the Lady Selene and Huron?
How are you going to ride with that in your saddle?
I will run.
The Ogier suited his words by breaking into a quick trot, pulling his horse behind him by the reins. Rand followed. The pace Loyal set was as fast as a horse could trot. Rand was sure the Ogier could not keep it for long, but Loyal's feet did not flag. Rand decided that his boast of once outrunning a horse might really be true. Now and again Loyal looked behind them as he ran, but the shouts of dark friends and howls of Trollocs faded with distance. Even when the ground began to slope upwards more sharply, Loyal's pace barely slowed, and he trotted into their campsite on the mountainside with only a little hard breathing. You have it. Selene's voice was exultant as her gaze rested on the ornately worked chest on Loyal's saddle. She was wearing her own dress again. It looked as white as new snow to Rand. I knew you would make the right choice. May I have a look at it? Did any of them follow, my lord? Huron asked anxiously. He stared at the chest with awe, but his eyes slid off into the night down the mountain. If they followed, we'll have to move quick. I do not think they did. Go to the outcrop and see if you can see anything. Rand climbed down from his saddle as Huron hurried up the mountain. Selene, I don't know how to open the chest. Loyal, do you? The Ogier shook his head. Let me try. Even for a woman of Selene's height, Loyal's saddle was high above the ground. She reached up to touch the finely wrought patterns on the chest, ran her hands across them, pressed. There was a click, and she pushed the lid up, let it fall open. As she stretched on tiptoe to put a hand inside, Rand reached over her shoulder and lifted out the horn of Valere. He had seen it once before, but never touched it. Though beautifully made, it did not look a thing of great age or power. A curled golden horn, gleaming in the faint light with inlaid silver script flowing around the mouth of the bell. He touched the strange letters with a finger. They seemed to catch the moon. Tia me aven moridin isainde vadin, Selene said. The grave is no bar to my call. You will be greater than Arthur Hawkwing ever was. I am taking it to Shienar, to Lord Agomar. It should go to Tar Valon, he thought, but I'm done with Aes Sedai. Let Agomar or Ingtar take it to them. He set the horn back in the chest. It cast back the moonlight, pulled the eye. That is madness, Selene said. Rand flinched at the word. Mad or not, it is what I'm doing. I told you, Selene, I want no part of greatness. Back there, I thought I did. For a while, I thought I wanted things... Light, she's so beautiful. Egwene, Celine. I'm not worthy of either of them. Something seemed to take hold of me. Saladin came for me, but I fought it off with a sword. Or is that mad too? He breathed deeply. Shinar is where the Horn of Valir belongs. Or if not there, Lord Agomar will know what to do with it. Huron appeared from up the mountain. There's fire there again, Lord Rand, and bigger than ever. And I thought I heard shouting. It was all down in the hills. I don't think they've come up on the mountain yet. You misunderstand me, Rand, Celine said. You cannot go back now. You are committed. Those friends of the dark will not simply go away because you've taken the horn from them. Far from it. Unless you know some way to kill them all, they will be hunting you now as you hunted them before. No! Loyal and Huron looked surprised at Rand's vehemence. He softened his tone. I don't know any way to kill them all. They can live forever for all of me. Celine's long hair shifted in waves as she shook her head. Then you cannot go back, only onward. You can reach the safety of Carian's walls long before you could return to Shinar. Does the thought of a few more days in my company seem so onerous? Rand stared at the chest. Celine's company was far from burdensome, but near her he could not help thinking things he should not. Still, trying to ride back north meant risking Fane and his followers. She was right in that. Fane would never give up. Ingtar would not give up either. If Ingtar came on southward, and Rand knew of no reason for him to turn aside, he would arrive at Cairhien soon or late. Cairhien, he agreed. You will have to show me where you live, Celine. I've never been to Cairhien. He reached to close the chest. You took something else from the Friends of the Dark? Celine said. You spoke earlier of a dagger. How could I forget? He left the chest as it was and pulled the dagger from his belt. The bare blade curved like a horn, and the quillons were golden serpents. Set in the hilt, a ruby as big as his thumbnail winked like an evil eye in the moonlight. Ornate as it was, tainted as he knew it was, it felt no different from any other knife. Be careful, Celine said. Do not cut yourself. Rand felt a shiver inside. If simply carrying it was dangerous, he did not want to know what a cut from it would do. This is from Shadar Logoth, he told the others. It will twist whoever carries it for long, taint them to the bone the way Shadar Logoth is tainted. Without Aes Sedai healing, that taint will kill eventually.
So that is what ails Matt,
Loyal said softly.
I never suspected.
Huron stared at the dagger in Rand's hand and wiped his own hands in the front of his coat. The sniffer did not look happy. None of us must handle it any more than is necessary, Rand went on. I will find some way to carry it. It is dangerous. Celine frowned at the blade as if the snakes were real and poisonous. Throw it away. Leave it or bury it if you wish to keep it from other hands, but be rid of it. Matt needs it, Rand said firmly. It is too dangerous. You said so yourself. He needs it. The Aes Sedai said he would die without it to use in healing him. They still have a string on him, but this blade will cut it. Until I'm rid of it, and the horn, they have a string on me. But I'll not dance however much they pull. He set the dagger in the chest inside the curl of the horn. There was just room for it, and pulled the lid down. It locked with a sharp snap. That should shield us from it. He hoped it would. Lan said the time to sound most sure was when you were least certain. The chest will surely shield us, Celine said in a tight voice. And now I mean to finish what is left of my night's sleep. Rand shook his head. We are too close. Fane seems able to find me sometimes. Seek the oneness if you are afraid, Celine said. I want to be as far from those dark friends come morning as we can be. I will saddle your mare. Stubborn. She sounded angry, and when he looked at her, her mouth curved in a smile that never came close to her dark eyes. A stubborn man is best once... Her voice trailed off, and that worried him. Women often seem to leave things unsaid, and in his limited experience, it was what they did not say that proved the most trouble. She watched in silence as he slung her saddle onto the white mare's back and bent to fashion the girths. "Gather them all in," Fane snarled. The goat-snouted Trolloc backed away from him. The fire, piled high with wood now, lit the hilltop with flickering shadows. His human followers huddled near the blaze, fearful to be out in the dark with the rest of the Trollocs. "Gather them, everyone that still lives, and if anything to run, let them know they'll get what that one got." He gestured to the first Trolloc that had brought him word Althor was not to be found. It still snapped at ground muddied with its own blood, hooves scraping trenches as they jerked. "Go," Fane whispered, and the goat-snouted Trolloc ran into the night. Fane glanced contemptuously at the other humans. They'll have their uses still. Then turned to stare into the night, toward Kinslayer's dagger. Althor was up there, somewhere in the mountains. With the horn. His teeth grated audibly at the thought. He did not know where exactly, but something pulled him toward the mountains. Toward Althor. That much of the Dark One's gift remained to him. He had hardly thought of it, had tried not to think of it, until suddenly, after the horn was gone, Althor was there, drawing him as meat draws a starving dog. "I am a dog no longer. A dog no longer!" He heard the others shifting uneasily around the fire, but he ignored them. "You will pay for what was done to me, Althor. The world will pay." He cackled at the night with mad laughter. "The world will pay." Chapter 20. Sardine. Rand kept them moving through the night, allowing only a brief stop at dawn to rest the horses, and to allow Loyal rest. With the Horn of Valir and its gold and silver chest occupying his saddle, the Ogier walked or trotted ahead of his big horse, never complaining, never slowing them. Sometime during the night, they had crossed the border of Cairhien. "I want to see it again," Selene said as they halted. She dismounted and strode to Loyal's horse. Their shadows, long and thin, pointed west from the sun just peeking over the horizon. "Bring it down for me, Halantin." Loyal began to undo the straps. "The Horn of Valir." "No," Rand said, climbing down from Red's back. "Loyal, no." The Ogier looked from Rand to Selene, his ears twitching doubtfully, but he took his hands away. "I want to see the horn," Selene demanded. Rand was sure she was no older than he, but at that moment she suddenly seemed as old and as cold as the mountains, and more regal than Queen Morgaze at her haughtiest. "I think we should keep the dagger shielded," Rand said. "For all I know, looking at it may be as bad as touching it. Let it stay where it is until I can put it in Matt's hands. He can take it to the Aes Sedai. And what price will they demand for that healing? But he hasn't any choice." He felt a little guilty over feeling relief that he, at least, was through with Aes Sedai. "I am done with him, one way or another." "The dagger. All you seem to care about is that dagger. I told you to be rid of it. The Horn of Valir, Rand." "No." She came to him, a sway in her walk that made him feel as if he had something caught in his throat. "All I want is to see it in the light of day. I won't even touch it. You hold it. It will be something for me to remember, you holding the Horn of Valir in your hands." She took his hands as she said it. Her touch made his skin tingle and his mouth go dry. Something to remember when she had gone. He could close the dagger up again as soon as the horn was out of the chest. It would be something to hold the horn in his hands where he could see it in the light. He wished he knew more of the prophecies of the dragon. The one time he had heard a merchant's guard telling a part of it, back in Emond's Field, Nynaeve had broken a broom across the man's shoulders. None of the little he had heard mentioned the Horn of Valir. Aes Sedai, trying to make me do what they want. Selene was still gazing intently into his eyes, her face so young and beautiful that he wanted to kiss her despite what he was thinking. He had never seen an Aes Sedai act the way she did, and she looked young, not ageless. A girl my age couldn't be Aes Sedai, but "Celine," he said softly, "are you an Aes Sedai?" "Aes Sedai?" She almost spat, flinging his hands away. "Aes Sedai? Always you hurl that at me." She took a deep breath and smoothed her dress as if gathering herself. "I am what and who I am, and I am no Aes Sedai." And she wrapped herself in a silent coldness that made even the morning sun seem chill. Loyal and Huron bore it all with as good a grace as they could manage, trying to make conversation and hiding their embarrassment when she froze them with a look. They rode on. By the time they made camp that night beside a mountain stream that provided fish for their supper, Celine seemed to have regained some of her temper, chatting with the Ogier about books, speaking kindly to Huron. She barely spoke to Rand, though, unless he spoke first, either that evening or the following day as they rode through mountains that reared on either side of them like huge, jagged gray walls, ever climbing. But whenever he looked at her, she was watching him and smiling. Sometimes it was the sort of smile that made him smile back, sometimes the sort that made him clear his throat and blush at his own thoughts, and sometimes the mysterious, knowing smile that Egwene sometimes wore. It was a kind of smile that always put his back up, but at least it was a smile. She can't be Aes Sedai. The way began to slope downwards, and with the promise of twilight in the air, Kinslayer's dagger at last gave way to hills, rolling and round, with more brush than trees, more thickets than forest. There was no road, just a dirt track, such as might be used by a few carts now and again. Fields carved some of the hills into terraces, fields full of crops but empty of people at this hour. None of the scattered farm buildings lay close enough to the path they rode for Rand to make out more than that they were all made of stone. When he saw the village ahead, lights already twinkled in the few windows against the coming of night. "We'll sleep in beds tonight," he said. "That I will enjoy, Lord Rand," Huron laughed. Loyal nodded agreement. "A village inn," Celine sniffed. "Dirty, no doubt, and full of unwashed men swilling ale. Why can't we sleep under the stars again? I find I enjoy sleeping under the stars." "You would not enjoy it if Fane caught up with us while we slept," Rand said. "Him and those Trollocs. He's coming after me, Celine. After the horn, too, but it is me he can find. Why do you think I've kept such a close watch these past nights? If Fane catches us, you will deal with him." Her voice was coolly confident. "And there could be dark friends in the village, too. But even if they know who we are, they can't do much with the rest of the villagers around. Not unless you think everyone in the village is a dark friend. And if they discover you carry the horn, whether you want greatness or not, even farmers dream of it."
She is right, Rand,
Loyal said.
"I fear even farmers might want to take it."
"Unroll your blanket, Loyal, and throw it over the chest. Keep it covered." Loyal complied, and Rand nodded. It was obvious there was a box or chest beneath the Ogier's striped blanket, but nothing suggested it was more than a travel chest. "My lady's chest of clothes," Rand said with a grin and a bow. Celine met his sally with silence and an unreadable look. After a moment, they started on again. Almost immediately, off to Rand's left, a glimmer from the setting sun reflected from something on the ground. Something large. Something very large by the light it threw up. Curious, he turned his horse that way. "My lord," Huron said, "the village?" "I just want to see this first," Rand said. "It's brighter than sunlight on water. What can it be?" His eyes in the reflection, he was surprised when Red suddenly stopped. On the point of urging the bay on, he realized that they stood on the edge of a clay precipice, above a huge excavation. Most of the hill had been dug away to a depth of easily 100 paces. Certainly more than one hill had vanished, and maybe some farmers' fields, for the hole was at least 10 times as wide as it was deep. The far side appeared to have been packed hard to a ramp. There were men on the bottom, a dozen of them, getting a fire started. Down there, night was already descending. Here and there among them, armor turned the light, and swords swung at their sides. He hardly glanced at them. Out of the clay at the bottom of the pit slanted a gigantic stone hand, holding a crystal sphere. And it was this that shone with the last sunlight. Rand gaped at the size of it. A smooth ball. He was sure not so much as a scratch marred its surface, at least 20 paces through. Some distance away from the hand, a stone face in proportion had been uncovered. A bearded man's face, it thrust out of the soil with the dignity of vast years. The broad features seemed to hold wisdom and knowledge. Unsummoned, the void formed, whole and complete in an instant. Saidin glowing, beckoning. So intent was he on the face and the hand that he did not realize what had happened. He had once heard a ship captain speak of a giant hand holding a huge crystal sphere. Baal Doman had claimed it stuck out of a hill on the island of Tremalking. "This is dangerous," Selene said. "Come away, Rand." "I believe I can find a way down there," he said absently. Saidin sang to him. The huge ball seemed to glow white with the light of the sinking sun. It seemed to him that in the depths of the crystal, light swirled and danced in time to the song of Saidin. He wondered why the men below did not appear to notice. Selene rode close and took hold of his arm. "Please, Rand, you must come away." He looked at her hand, puzzled, then followed her arm up to her face. She seemed genuinely worried, perhaps even afraid. "If this bank doesn't give way beneath our horses and break our necks with the fall, those men are guards, and no one puts guards on something they wish every passerby to examine. What good will it do to avoid Thane if some lord's guards arrest you? Come away." Suddenly, a drifting, distant thought, he realized that the void surrounded him. Saidin sang, and the sphere pulsed. Even without looking, he could feel it. And the thought came that if he sang the song Saidin sang, that huge stone face would open its mouth and sing with him. With him and with Saidin, all one. "Please, Rand," Selene said. "I will go to the village with you. I won't mention the horn again. Only come away." He released the void, and it did not go. Saidin crooned, and the light in the sphere beat like a heart. Like his heart. Loyal, Huron, Selene, they all stared at him, but they seemed oblivious to the glorious blaze from the crystal. He tried to push the void away. It held like granite. He floated in an emptiness as hard as stone. The song of Saidin, the song of the sphere. He could feel them quivering along his bones. Grimly, he refused to give in, reached deep inside himself. "I will not." Rand. He did not know whose voice it was. Reached for the core of who he was. The core of what he was. Will not. Rand. The song filled him, filled the emptiness. Touched stone, hot from a pitiless sun, cold from a merciless night. Not. Light filled him, blinded him. "Till shade is gone," he mumbled. "Till water is gone." Power filled him. He was one with the sphere. Into the shadow with teeth bared. The power was his. The power was his. To spit in Sightblinder's eye. Power to break the world. On the last day. It came out as a shout, and the void was gone. Red shied at his cry. Clay crumbled under the stallion's hoof, spilling into the pit. The big bay went to his knees. Rand leaned forward, gathering the reins, and Red scrambled to safety away from the edge. They were all staring at him, he saw. Selene, Loyal, Huron, all of them. What happened? The void. He touched his forehead. The void had not gone when he released it, and the glow of Saidin had grown stronger, and he could not remember anymore. Saidin. He felt cold. Did I do something? He frowned, trying to remember. Did I say something?
"You just sat there stiff as a statue," Loyal said, mumbling to yourself no matter what anyone said. "I couldn't make out what you were saying. Not until you shouted 'Day' loud enough to wake the dead and nearly put your horse over the edge. Are you ill? You're acting more and more oddly every day."
I am not sick. Rand said harshly, then softened it. I'm all right, Loyal. Celine watched him warily. From the pit came the sound of men calling, the words indistinguishable. Lord Rand, Huron said, I think those guards have finally noticed us. If they know a way up this side, they could be here any minute. Yes, Celine said. Let us leave here quickly. Rand glanced at the excavation, then away again, quickly. The great crystal held nothing except reflected light from the evening sun, but he did not want to look at it. He could almost remember something about the sphere. I don't see any reason to wait for them. We didn't do anything. Let's find an inn. He turned red toward the village, and they soon left the pit and shouting guards behind. As many villages did, Tremoncine covered the top of a hill, but like the farms they had passed, this hill had been sculpted into terraces with stone retaining walls. Square stone houses sat on precise plots of land with exact gardens behind, along a few straight streets that crossed each other at right angles. The necessity of a curve to streets going around the hill seemed begrudged. Yet the people seemed open and friendly enough, pausing to nod to each other as they hurried about their last chores before nightfall. They were a short folk, none taller than Rand's shoulder, and few as tall as Huron, with dark eyes and pale, narrow faces, and dressed in dark clothes, except for a few who wore slashes of color across the chest. Smells of cooking, oddly spiced to Rand's nose, filled the air, though a handful of goodwives still hung over their doors to talk. The doors were split so the top could stand open while the bottom was closed. The people eyed the newcomers curiously, with no sign of hostility. A few stared a moment longer at Loyal and Ogier walking alongside a horse as big as a Duran stallion, but never more than a moment longer. The inn, at the very top of the hill, was stone like every other building in the town and plainly marked by a painted sign hanging over the wide doors. The 9 Rings. Rand swung down with a smile and tied Red to one of the hitching posts out front. The 9 Rings had been one of his favorite adventure stories when he was a boy. He supposed it still was. Celine still seemed uneasy when he helped her dismount. Are you all right? He asked. I didn't frighten you back there, did I? Red would never fall over a cliff with me. He wondered what had really happened. You terrified me, she said in a tight voice. And I do not frighten easily. You could have killed yourself. She smoothed her dress. Ride with me, tonight, now. Bring the horn, and I will stay by your side forever. Think of it, me by your side, and the horn of Valir in your hands. And that will only be the beginning, I promise. What more could you ask for? Rand shook his head. I can't, Celine. The horn... He looked around. A man looked out his window across the way, then twitched the curtains closed. Evening darkened the street, and there was no one else in sight now except Loyal and Huron. The horn is not mine. I told you that. She turned her back on him, her white cloak walling him off as effectively as bricks. Chapter 21. The 9 Rings. Rand expected the common room to be empty since it was nearly supper time, but half a dozen men crowded one table, dicing among their jacks of ale, and another sat by himself over a meal. Though the dicers carried no weapons in sight and wore no armor, only plain coats and breeches of dark blue, something about the way they held themselves told Rand they were soldiers. His eyes went to the solitary man. An officer with the tops of his high boots turned down and his sword propped against the table beside his chair. A single slash of red and one of yellow crossed the chest of the officer's blue coat from shoulder to shoulder, and the front of his head was shaved, though his black hair hung long in the back. The soldier's hair was clipped short, as if it had all been cut under the same bowl. All 7 turned to look as Rand and the others came in. The innkeeper was a lean woman with a long nose and graying hair, but her wrinkles seemed part of her ready smile more than anything else. She came bustling up, wiping her hands on a spotless white apron. Good evening to you. Her quick eyes took in Rand's gold-embroidered red coat and Celine's fine white dress. My lord, my lady. I am Magnan Madwyn, my lord. Be welcome to the 9 Rings. And an Ogier. Not many of your kind come this way, friend Ogier. Would you be up from steading Tsofu, then? Loyal managed an awkward half-bow under the weight of the chest.
No, good innkeeper. I come the other way, from the borderlands.
From the borderlands, you say? Well... And you, my lord? Forgive me for asking, but you've not the look of the borderlands, if you don't mind my saying it. I'm from the Two Rivers, Mistress Medwin, in Andor. He glanced at Celine. She did not seem to admit he existed. Her level look barely admitted that the room existed, or anyone in it. The Lady Celine is from Kyrian, from the capital, and I am from Andor. As you say, my lord. Mistress Madwin's glance flickered to Rand's sword. The bronze herons were plain on the scabbard and hilt. She frowned slightly, but her face was clear again in a blink. You will be wanting a meal for yourself and your beautiful lady and your followers. And rooms, I expect. I'll have your horses seen to. I have a good table for you right this way, and pork with yellow peppers on the fire. Would you be hunting the Horn of Valir then, my lord? You and your lady? In the act of following her, Rand almost stumbled. No. How would you think we were? No offense, my lord. We've had 2 through here already, all polished to look like heroes, not to suggest anything of the kind about you, my lord, in the last month. Not many strangers come here, except traders up from the capital to buy oats and barley. I'd not suppose the hunt has left Ilion yet, but maybe some don't think they really need the blessing, and they'll get a jump on the others by missing it. We are not hunting the Horn, mistress. Rand did not glance at the bundle in Loyal's arms. The blanket with its colorful stripes hung bunched over the Ogier's thick arms and disguised the chest well. We surely are not. We are on our way to the capital. As you say, my lord. Forgive me for asking, but is your lady well? Celine looked at her and spoke for the first time. I am quite well. Her voice left a chill in the air that stifled talk for a moment. You're not Kyrian and Mistress Madwin, Huron said suddenly. Burdened down with their saddlebags and Rand's bundle, he looked like a walking baggage cart. Pardon, but you don't sound it. Mistress Madwin's eyebrows rose, and she shot a glance at Rand, then grinned. I should have known you'd let your man speak freely, but I've grown used to... Her glance darted toward the officer, who had gone back to his own meal. No, I'm not Kyrianin, but for my sins I married one. 23 years I lived with him, and when he died on me, the light shine on him, I was all ready to go back to Lugard. But he had the last laugh, he did. He left me the inn and his brother the money, when I was sure it would be the other way round. Tricksome and scheming, Baron was, like every man I've ever known. Kyrianin most of all. Will you be seated, my lord, my lady? The innkeeper gave a surprised blink when Huron sat at table with them. And Ogier, it seemed, was one thing, but Huron was clearly a servant in her eyes. With another quick look at Rand, she bustled off to the kitchens, and soon serving girls came with their meal, giggling and staring at the lord and the lady, and the Ogier, till Mistress Madwin chased them back to their work. At first Rand stared at his food doubtfully. The pork was cut in small bits mixed with long strips of yellow peppers and peas, and a number of vegetables and things he did not recognize, all in some sort of clear, thick sauce. It smelled sweet and sharp, both at the same time. Celine only picked at hers, but Loyal was eating with a will. Huron grinned at Rand over his fork. They spice their food oddly, Kyrianin do, Lord Rand. But for all that, it's not bad.
It won't bite you, Rand,
Loyal added. Rand took a hesitant mouthful and almost gasped. It tasted just as it smelled, sweet and sharp together. The pork crisp on the outside and tender inside. A dozen different flavors, spices, all blending and contrasting. It tasted like nothing he had ever put in his mouth before. It tasted wonderful. He cleaned his plate, and when Mistress Madwin returned with the serving girls to clear away, he nearly asked for more the way Loyal did. Celine's was still half full, and she motioned curtly for one of the girls to take it. A pleasure, friend Ogier. The innkeeper smiled. It takes a lot to fill up one of you. Katrin, bring another helping and be quick. One of the girls darted away. Mistress Madwin turned her smile on Rand. My lord, I had a man here who played the bittern, but he married a girl off one of the farms, and she has him strumming reins behind a plow now. I couldn't help noticing what looks like a flute case sticking out of your man's bundle. Since my musician's gone, would you let your man favor us with a little music?" Huron looked embarrassed. He doesn't play," Rand explained. "I do." The woman blinked. It appeared lords did not play the flute, at least not in Kyrian. "I withdraw the request, my lord. Lightsome truth, I meant no offense, I assure you. I'd never ask one such as yourself to be playing in a common room." Rand hesitated only a moment. It had been too long since he had practiced the flute rather than the sword, and the coins in his pouch would not last forever. Once he was rid of his fancy clothes, once he turned the horn over to Ingtar and the dagger over to Matt, he would need the flute to earn his supper again while they searched for somewhere safe from Aes Sedai. And safe from myself? Something did happen back there. What? "I don't mind," he said. "Huron, hand me the case. Just slide it out." There was no need to show a gleeman's cloak. Enough unspoken questions shone in Mistress Madwyn's dark eyes as it was. Worked gold chased with silver, the instrument looked the sort a lord might play, if lords anywhere played the flute. The heron branded on his right palm did not interfere with his fingering. Celine's salves had worked so well, he hardly thought of the brand unless he saw it. Yet it was in his thoughts now, and unconsciously he began to play Heron on the Wing. Huron bobbed his head to the tune, and Loyal beat time on the table with a thick finger. Celine looked at Rand as if wondering what he was. "I'm not a lord, milady. I'm a shepherd, and I play the flute in common rooms." But the soldiers turned from their talk to listen, and the officer closed the wooden cover of the book he had begun reading. Celine's steady gaze struck a stubborn spark inside Rand. Determinedly, he avoided any song that might fit in a palace or a lord's manor. He played Only One Bucket of Water and The Old Two Rivers Leaf, Old Jack's Up a Tree, and Goodman Pricket's Pipe. With the last, the 6 soldiers began to sing in raucous tones, though not the words Rand knew. We rode down to River Irelel, just to see the Tyran come. We stood along the river bank with the rising of the sun. Their horses black the summer plain, their banners black the sky. But we stood our ground on the banks of River Irelel. Oh, we stood our ground. Yes, we stood our ground. Stood our ground along the river in the morning. It was not the first time that Rand had discovered a tune had different words and different names in different lands, sometimes even in villages in the same land. He played along with them until they let the words die away, slapping each other's shoulders and making rude comments on one another's singing. When Rand lowered the flute, the officer rose and made a sharp gesture. The soldiers fell silent in mid-laugh, scraped back their chairs to bow to the officer with hand on breast, and to Rand, and left without a backwards look. The officer came to Rand's table and bowed, hand to heart. The shave in front of his head looked as if he had dusted it with white powder. "Grace favor you, my lord. I trust they did not bother you, singing as they did. They are a common sort, but they meant no insult, I assure you. I am Aldrin Calderwyn, my lord, captain in His Majesty's service, the light illumine him." His eyes slid over Rand's sword. Rand had the feeling Calderwyn had noticed the herons as soon as he came in. "They didn't insult me." The officer's accent reminded him of Moraine's, precise and every word pronounced to its full. "Did she really let me go? I wonder if she's following me, or waiting for me." "Sit down, Captain, please." Calderwyn drew a chair from another table. "Tell me, Captain, if you don't mind, have you seen any other strangers recently? A lady, short and slender, and a fighting man with blue eyes. He's tall, and sometimes he wears his sword on his back." "I have seen no strangers at all," he said, lowering himself stiffly to his seat. "Saving yourself and your lady, my lord. Few of the nobility ever come here." His eyes flicked toward Loyal with a minute frown. Huron he ignored for a servant. It was only a thought. "Under the light, my lord. I mean no disrespect. But may I hear your name? We have so few strangers here that I find I wish to know everyone." Rand gave it. He claimed no title, but the officer seemed not to notice, and said, as he had to the innkeeper, "From the 2 rivers in Andor. A wondrous place, I have heard, Lord Rand. I may call you so? And fine men, the Andaman. No Carrienin has ever worn a Blade Master's sword so young as you. I met some Andaman once, the Captain General of the Queen's Guards among them. I do not remember his name. An embarrassment. Perhaps you could favor me with it?" Rand was conscious of the serving girls in the background, beginning to clean and sweep. Caldewan seemed only to be making conversation, but there was a probing quality to his look. "Gareth Bryn. Of course. Young to hold so much responsibility." Rand kept his voice level. "Gareth Bryn has enough gray in his hair to be your father, Captain." "Forgive me, my Lord Rand. I meant to say that he came to it young." Caldewan turned to Celine, and for a moment he only stared. He shook himself, finally, as if coming out of a trance. "Forgive me for looking at you so, milady, and forgive me for speaking so, but grace has surely favored you. Will you give me a name to put to such beauty?" Just as Celine opened her mouth, one of the serving girls let out a cry and dropped a lamp she was taking down from a shelf. The oil splattered and caught in a pool of flame on the floor. Rand leaped to his feet along with the others at the table, but before any of them could move, Mistress Madwyn appeared, and she and the girls smothered the flames with their aprons. "I have told you to be careful, Captain," the innkeeper said, shaking her now smutty apron under the girl's nose. "You'll be burning the inn down and yourself in it." The girl seemed on the point of tears. "I was being careful, mistress, but I had such a twinge in my arm." Mistress Madwyn threw up her hands. "You always have some excuse, and you still break more dishes than all the rest. It's all right. Clean it up and don't burn yourself." The innkeeper turned to Rand and the others, all still standing around the table. "I hope none of you take this amiss. The girl really won't burn down the inn. She's hard on the dishes when she starts mooning over some young fellow, but she's never mishandled a lamp before. I would like to be shown to my room. I do not feel well after all." Celine spoke in careful tones, as though uncertain of her stomach, but despite that, she looked and sounded as cool and calm as ever. "The journey and the fire." The innkeeper clucked like a mother hen. "Of course, my lady. I have a fine room for you and your lord. Shall I fetch Mother Cara Dwayne? She has a fine hand with soothing herbs." Celine's voice sharpened. "No, and I wish a room by myself." Mistress Madwyn glanced at Rand, but the next moment she was bowing Celine solicitously toward the stairs. "As you wish, my lady. Leiden, fetch the lady's things like a good girl now." One of the serving girls ran to take Celine's saddlebags from Huron, and the women disappeared upstairs, Celine stiff-backed and silent. Caldewan stared after them until they were gone, then shook himself again. He waited until Rand had seated himself before taking his chair again. "Forgive me, my Lord Rand, for staring so at your lady, but grace has surely favored you in her. I mean no insult." "None taken," Rand said. He wondered if every man felt the way he did when they looked at Celine. "As I was riding to the village, Captain, I saw a huge sphere. Crystal, it seemed. What is it?" The Carrienin's eyes sharpened. "It is part of the statue, my Lord Rand," he said slowly. His gaze flickered toward Loyal. For an instant, he seemed to be considering something new. "Statue? I saw a hand and a face, too. It must be huge." "It is, my Lord Rand. And old." Caldewan paused. "From the Age of Legends, so I am told." Rand felt a chill. The Age of Legends, when use of the One Power was everywhere, if the stories could be believed. What happened there? I know there was something.
"The Age of Legends," Loyal said. "Yes, it must be. No one has done work so vast since. A great piece of work to dig that up, Captain."
Huron sat silently, as if he not only was not listening, but was not there at all. Calderwood nodded reluctantly. I have 500 laborers in camp beyond the diggings, and even so, it will be past summer's end before we have it clear. They are men from the foregate. Half my work is to keep them digging, and the other half is to keep them out of this village. Foregaters have a fondness for drinking and carousing, you understand. And these people lead quiet lives. His tone said his sympathies were all with the villagers. Rand nodded. He had no interest in foregaters, whoever they were. What will you do with it? The captain hesitated, but Rand only looked back at him until he spoke. Galdrian himself has ordered that it be taken to the capital. Loyal blinked.
A very great piece of work, that. I am not sure how something that big could be moved so far.
His Majesty has ordered it, Calderwood said sharply. It will be set up outside the city, a monument to the greatness of Carian and of House Ryoton. Ogier are not the only ones who know how to move stone. Loyal looked abashed, and the captain visibly calmed himself. Your pardon, friend Ogier. I spoke in haste and rudely. He still sounded a little gruff. Will you be staying in Tremoncian long, my Lord Rand? We leave in the morning, Rand said. We are going to Carian. As it happens, I am sending some of my men back to the city tomorrow. I must rotate them. They grow stale after too long watching men swing picks and shovels. You will not mind if they ride in your company? He put it as a question, but as if acceptance were a foregone conclusion. Mistress Madwyn appeared on the stairs, and he rose. If you will excuse me, my Lord Rand, I must be up early. Until the morning, then. Grace favor you. He bowed to Rand, nodded to Loyal, and left. As the doors closed behind the Kyrianan, the innkeeper came to the table. I have your lady settled, my lord, and I've good rooms prepared for you and your man, and you, friend Ogier. She paused, studying Rand. Forgive me if I overstep, my lord, but I think I can speak freely to a lord who lets his man speak up. If I'm wrong, well, I mean no insult. For 23 years, Baron Madwyn and I were arguing when we weren't kissing, so to speak. That's by way of saying I have some experience. Right now, you're thinking your lady never wants to see you again. But it's my way of thinking that if you tap on her door tonight, she'll be taking you in. Smile and say it was your fault, whether it was or not. Rand cleared his throat and hoped his face was not turning red. Light. Egwene would kill me if she knew I'd even thought of it. And Selene would kill me if I did it. Or would she? That did make his cheeks burn. I thank you for your suggestion, Mistress Madwyn. The rooms? He avoided looking at the blanket-covered chest by Loyal's chair. They did not dare leave it without someone awake and guarding it. We three will all sleep in the same room. The innkeeper looked startled, but she recovered quickly. As you wish, my lord. This way, if you please. Rand followed her up the stairs. Loyal carried the chest under its blanket. The stairs groaned under the weight of him and the chest together, but the innkeeper seemed to think it was just an Ogier's bulk. And Huron still carried all the saddlebags and the bundled cloak with the harp and flute. Mistress Madwyn had a third bed brought in and hastily assembled and made up. One of the beds already there stretched nearly from wall to wall in length, and had obviously been meant for Loyal from the start. There was barely room to walk between the beds. As soon as the innkeeper was gone, Rand turned to the others. Loyal had pushed the still-covered chest under his bed and was drawing the mattress. Huron was setting out the saddlebags. Do either of you know why that captain was so suspicious of us? He was, I'm sure of it. He shook his head. I almost think he thought we might steal that statue the way he was talking. Deus Daemar, Lord Rand, Huron said. The great game. The game of houses, some call it. This Calderwood thinks you must be doing something to your advantage or you wouldn't be here. And whatever you're doing might be to his disadvantage, so he has to be careful. Rand shook his head. The great game? What game?
It isn't a game at all, Rand,
Loyal said from his bed. He had pulled a book from his pocket, but it lay unopened on his chest.
I don't know much about it. Ogier don't do such things, but I have heard of it. The nobles and the noble houses maneuver for advantage. They do things they think will help them, or hurt an enemy, or both. Usually it's all done in secrecy, or if not, they try to make it seem as if they're doing something other than what they are.
He gave one tufted ear a puzzled scratch.
Even knowing what it is, I don't understand it. Elder Hammond always said it would take a greater mind than his to understand the things humans do, and I don't know many as intelligent as Elder Hammond. You humans are odd.
Huron gave the Ogier a slanted look, but he said, "He has the right of Deus Demar, Lord Rand. Carriennen play it more than most, though all Southerners do." "These soldiers in the morning," Rand said, "are they part of Calderwin playing this great game? We can't afford to get mixed in anything like that." There was no need to mention the horn. They were all too aware of its presence. Loyal shook his head.
I don't know, Rand. He's human, so it could mean anything.
Huron? "I don't know either." Huron sounded as worried as the Ogier looked. "He could be doing just what he said, or... That's the way of the game of houses. You never know. I spent most of my time at Carrion in the Foregate, Lord Rand, and I don't know much about Carriennen nobles, but... Well, Deus Demar can be dangerous anywhere, but especially in Carrion, I've heard." He brightened suddenly. "The Lady Celine, Lord Rand. She'll know better than me or the Builder. You could ask her in the morning." But in the morning, Celine was gone. When Rand went down to the common room, Mistress Magwyn handed him a sealed parchment. "If you'll forgive me, my lord, you should have listened to me. You should have tapped on your lady's door." Rand waited until she went away before he broke the white wax seal. The wax had been impressed with a crescent moon and stars. "I must leave you for a time. There are too many people here, and I do not like Calderwin. I will await you in Carrion. Never think that I am too far from you. You will be in my thoughts always, as I know that I am in yours." It was not signed, but that elegant flowing script had the look of Celine. He folded it carefully and put it in his pocket before going outside, where Huron had the horses waiting. Captain Calderwin was there too, with another younger officer and 50 mounted soldiers crowding the street. The two officers were bareheaded, but wore steel-blacked gauntlets and gold-worked breastplates strapped over their blue coats. A short staff was fastened to the harness of each officer's back, bearing a small, stiff blue banner above his head. Calderwin's banner bore a single white star, while the younger man's was crossed by 2 white bars. They were a sharp contrast to the soldiers in their plain armor and helmets that looked like bells with metal cut away to expose their faces. Calderwin bowed as Rand came out of the inn. "Good morning to you, my Lord Rand. This is Elric Kane Tavalin, who will command your escort, if I may call it that." The other officer bowed. His head was shaved as Calderwin's was. He did not speak. "An escort will be welcome, Captain," Rand said, managing to sound at ease. Thane would not try anything against 50 soldiers, but Rand wished he could be certain they were only an escort. The captain eyed Loyal, on his way to his horse with the blanket-covered chest. "A heavy burden, Ogier." Loyal almost missed a step.
I never like to be far from my books, Captain.
His wide mouth flashed teeth in a self-conscious grin, and he hurried to strap the chest onto his saddle. Calderwin looked around, frowning. "Your lady is not down yet, and her fine animal is not here." "She left already," Rand told him. "She had to go on to Carrion quickly during the night." Calderwin's eyebrows lifted. "During the night? But my men..." "Forgive me, my Lord Rand." He drew the young officer aside, whispering furiously. "He had the inn watched, Lord Rand," Huron whispered. "The Lady Celine must have gotten past them unseen somehow." Rand climbed to Red's saddle with a grimace. If there had been any chance Calderwin did not suspect them of something, it seemed Celine had finished it. "Too many people, she says," he muttered. "There'll be more people by far in Carrion." "You said something, my lord." Rand looked up as Tavalin joined him, mounted on a tall, dust-colored gelding. Huron was in his saddle too, and Loyal stood beside his big horse's head. The soldiers were formed up in ranks. Coldevin was nowhere to be seen. Nothing is happening the way I expect, Rand said. Toblin gave him a brief smile, hardly more than a twitch of his lips. Shall we ride, my lord? The strange procession headed for the hard-packed road that led to the city of Cairhien.